there's no question that most generations of Christians who read Revelation expected the world to end in some literal sense of this kind of phantasmagoria. I mean, there was going to be a beast, and it was. I mean, this. It's, undoubtedly they thought this was going to happen in their own time, under Rome, but this is if you're going to go purely literary on any of these texts, on some level, you're playing tennis without the net. You're unconstrained by the text, and you can do with it more or less anything you want.
But isn't that argument working at cross purposes with your other argument about dogma?
Because it's always tempting. First of all, there are lines that do not announce that they're susceptible to that interpretation. I mean, yes, you can say, listen, Allah does not want us to cut the hands off of thieves. He just, he meant cut the hand of their volition rather than their actual hands, right? So you're constraining them rather than cutting. Now, sure, undoubtedly there was some Muslim somewhere who wants to interpret it that way, but it gets harder and harder the clearer the line is. And the problem with all of these texts is that there are so many principles. Again, I mean, so to read Revelation any way you want, it is still a problem that it is perfectly rational on the basis of reading that text to expect the world to end and for Jesus to be the only savior of it. Therefore, if you happen to be born a Hindu or born a Muslim or born a Jew who doesn't recognize Jesus to be the Messiah, you are screwed for all eternity.
It's a funny thing, though. I mean, it's a strange thing, let's say, that one of the things we already agreed on, as far as I can tell, is that the antidote to pathological dogmatism is free, truthful expression, something like that. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the things I would say that's absolutely crucial to Christianity in particular is the notion that the thing that's redeeming is exactly that, and it doesn't matter. So it's universal truth. Now, if we both agree on that, the idea that the free expression of truthful speech is the antidote, let's say, both to nihilism and to totalitarianism, then the notion that might be embodied in something like the Word, which is truly, I think, the deepest of Christian ideas. How is that not the same claim? Now, let me elaborate it a little bit more completely. So here's the strange thing. First of all, I agree with you, by the way, about the danger of flying off the text, right? About as you move away from the text, your interpretation gets less and less constrained. And I think it's also the same danger as moving away from the facts, which is, I think, why you want to ground values in facts. So I get that argument, and I think it's accurate. But here's something strange, is that this notion that redemption is to be found in truthful speech is actually embodied in Christian mythology, let's say, as a personality and not as an idea. It's actually something that you embody and act out. It's not just an idea. And that's why there's an emphasis on the idea of the embodiment of the Word in flesh. It's a very sophisticated idea. I mean, it's an insanely sophisticated idea. So, and there's one more thing. So look, you've made the case, and I hope we can really get to this, because this is the really tough part of our discussion, I think, is that you want to ground the world of values in something that's true. We could say objectively true, but let's just say true for a minute. And I share that desire, but the problem is that I can't see, and you actually state this in your book, I can't see how you can interpret the world of facts without an a priori interpretive structure. And this is an old philosophical claim. It's not unique to me. It's the claim of Kant, for example, that you can't get directly from the fact to the value because there's an interpretive framework that mediates between you and the facts. So first of all, I'd like to know if you accept that proposition. And then the second question would be, if you do accept the proposition, then what's your understanding of the nature of the interpretive framework? Because I think it's best understood, at least in part, as a personality, or as a story for that matter. So,
well, I think our intuition of truth, the intuition that there's a difference between fact and fiction, or fact and fantasy, the intuition that we live in relationship to a common reality about which our understanding can converge, provided we're looking in the same direction with the same tools. I think it's certainly deeper than religion. It's not best captured by stories. Even if you could, as a matter of historical fact, point to its roots in story and myth and religion, that's not an argument that it's now in the 21st century best captured by story and myth and religion. I think it is a fundamental intuition to which our sanity, both personally and intersubjectively, is anchored. I mean, to lose a sense of objective reality is to lose the platform on which you can communicate with anyone and or rationally expect anything to happen a moment from now. To think that your memory represents something about a prior state of the world and your beliefs represent something about a possible state in the future, all of this is anchored to a sense that there's a difference between knowing something really and just imagining it. Right? There's a difference between perception and hallucination. All of these distinctions are born of this intuition. I think we have fundamental intuitions which are either impossible to analyze or can be analyzed with respect to only other intuitions, which we deem more rudimentary, upon which everything else we do as a matter of knowledge gathering and sense making is built. So the intuition that 2 + 2 makes 4, right? You at some point you learn basic arithmetic and you learn what addition is, and it's demonstrated to you with objects, and you're shown you take 2 apples and you take 2 more apples and then you have 4 apples. Look, just count them. The intuition that can be generalized to any 4 objects, right? That it's not just a fact about apples, right? This is something that we are clearly designed to have. There are places where it might break down, right? It might break down at the quantum level. It might break down in areas where our intuitions fail. We recognize those failures in science and mathematics by recourse to other intuitions, which again are unanalyzable. But so there is just this fact that we do pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and that's not embarrassing. I mean,
okay, so what's the difference between and I'm not trying to trap you here. I'm seriously not. So there might be mathematical intuitions, a prioris, let's say. Kant identified time and space as a priori intuitions.
Right.
But I think there's a third category of a priori intuitions that are in fact stories, or their personalities or stories. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to do a quick rereading of the moral landscape. So because, see, you talk about G.E. Moore's argument of infinite regress. If you claim that something's good and you equate it with something, you can also ask infinitely why the thing you're equating it with is good. Now, it seems to me that the way that you step out of that argument, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is you tell a story. I'm not trying to be smart about that. You tell 2 stories. You tell a story about someone who has an absolutely terrible life. They're in a jungle where nature is trying to kill them all the time, and while they're trying to be killed by nature, while nature is trying to kill them all the time, horrible barbaric thugs are making their life miserable in every possible way. Okay, so that's one pole, let's say. And then another pole, you identify, and these are hypotheticals, so I guess they're fictions. That's one way of thinking about it, even though they're extracted from real situations. They're meta-fictions, they're meta-truths. That's another way of thinking about it. You contrast a good life, and that's a life where the person has enough to eat and enough shelter, and they have the things that you would expect people to want. You say this is a bad life, and you say this is a good life, and then you say that's. And then you make a side move, which I would say is that that's an objectively verifiable fact. I would say, I don't think it is an objectively verifiable fact. I think it's a fundamental moral claim. And I think that's where you put your stake in the ground. And I would say, when I read that, I thought, well, if you take your jungle story, which you've extracted from a bunch of horrors and compiled, and you take your positive story, which you've extracted from a bunch of horrors, or a bunch of quasi-utopias, let's say, and compiled, you're 2/3 of the way to a landscape of hell and heaven.
Right.
Well, so then why not continue the abstraction and say, look, what we're really trying to avoid here is hell.
Oh, yeah.
What we're really trying to move towards is heaven. Yeah, but but
Well, no,
as soon as you do that, you're in a religious landscape.
No, but my name for hell is... This is very interesting because, like, you and I were talking about this at dinner. We were talking about this at dinner and how the overlap or lack of overlap between our audiences. And so, like, I just heard from your audience there, and
you might have heard from the odd convert.
But what's amazing to me is, so, like, I have to do some work to figure out what point they think you made. Because
wait a second. Wait, no.
Hold on.
No. And I said, if you're going to produce a fiction, why not go right to the end?
Okay,
because
so
you did produce a fiction.
You can tell stories by way of communicating certain ideas. I mean, that's obviously. I'm not saying stories aren't incredibly powerful and useful and inevitable, right? It's like we use.
Wait, I think you are. You might not be saying that they're not inevitable, but you are debating their utility and power. Because you said that you don't need the story as an intermediary.
I'm not. So now we have a few doors open here, which I think we should we should extract the most out of these areas that we've touched and not run on to something else. So I think there's to talk about the utility of story, right? Which is obviously a fact about the world and about human psychology that you're reading a lot into and more into than I'm reading, right? And the people we just heard from love that you.
Well, maybe I'm reading more into it than you are. I'm not sure about that.
But you talk a lot about the primacy of stories, and you are trying to get me to admit that even I helplessly resort to storytelling to make my points, right?
Well, you did there.
I think this is a good place for us to, and I don't want us to get bogged down, but I think it's a good place for us to touch this topic of the distinction between literal and metaphorical truth, which you might want to introduce it, but because that in my mind that covers this different emphasis on stories.
Okay, briefly, but we are at 60 minutes, and we had agreed to go an hour and 15 before we start Q&A. So I agree that metaphorical truth is relevant here. Metaphorical truth is my argument that there are some things which are literally false, but if you behave as if they were true, you come out ahead of where you would if you behaved according to the fact that they are false, and so that these things hover in a kind of intermediate space. To call them false is incorrect.
Right. And I hear Jordan wanting to call them true because they're so useful. Right.
Well, but you also look, this is what happens in the moral landscape, I think. Tell me why I'm wrong, because I'm really trying to understand it. See, I think you dealt with G.E. Moore's problem of infinite regress by staking a moral proposition. And your moral proposition was, look, here's a way things can be horrible, and here's a way things can be good. Can we accept that this is horrible and this is good, and that we should move towards good? And if the answer is yes, we can accept that, then we can proceed. And maybe we can even proceed with extracting values from facts, but we have to accept that a priori presupposition first. And you insist that we have to accept it because it's objectively true. And I don't think that's correct.
Well, so let me just get the proposition clear. So my argument is that the worst possible misery for everyone is bad.
That's hell.
Okay, so hell is the religious version of that, but you can forget about religion or whether there's a God or anything else. That we live in a universe that admits of the possibility of experience. I'm asking you to imagine a universe where every conscious mind, every mind that can have an experience, is tuned to the worst possible experience for that mind for as long as possible. So there's no silver lining, there are no lessons learned. Everything that can suffer suffers as much as it possibly can for as long as it can. Now that includes human beings, it includes animals, and it includes future AI that we might build that can suffer. It includes beings that we'll never know about, right? So my argument is that's bad. If anything is bad, that's bad.